Hey guys, welcome back to another great game of CDH. I'm back from Vegas and man, was that a blast. If you haven't seen already, I made a short of my experience there, and all of it linked in the corner and down below. But thanks to everyone I met and got games in with. Hey you, looking for a way to support the channel? Check out the Patreon. Want some cool mtga apparel? Check out the online shop. Or just looking to play some Magic? Hit us up on our Discord.
Alright, block there, kill that. Oh, that is trample. Guess I'm just dead on board.
Starting us off is Charles, bringing Yoshimaru and Kediss. Move over, Winota. There's a new aggro commander pair making waves. This doggo can grow absolutely massive in a very short time. And with the help of Kediss, he can take the whole table out in just a few swings. Next up is Colin, who has brought Narset Enlightened Exile. And this is a different take on the commander, forgoing the focus on the graveyard, and instead making this a Jeska's token build. Also, I should note this is a budget build. In the third spot is hidden on Malcolm Bruse. This is the more traditional Jeskai build, aiming to win with either an Underworld Breach or a Dualcaster Twin Flame combo, with the added bonus of getting Glinthorn Buccaneer as a 2-card combo with Malcolm, who even without the Buccaneer can still just generate a lot of mana to help power out your spells. And bringing up the rear is Fernando on Brago. This Azorius artifact control list uses Brago's ability to both reset mana rocks and gain card advantage abusing ETB effects. This is a slow and grindy deck that aims for the late game, utilizing an infinite combo with Strionic Resonator as a win con. But without further ado, let's get onto the gameplay. Hidden does have a pregame effect, as he plays a Gemstone Cavernous land and exiles a Snap from his hand. Charles starts off the game by cracking an Arid Mesa and grabbing a Plateau, shortcutting as he casts his commander Yoshimaru. Colin has a quick turn 1, playing a tap Castle Ardenvale, with hidden at his end step Enlightened Tutoring. He was debating between a Mana Crypt or a Soul Ring, and decides on the Soul Ring. Hidden draws this Soul Ring and plays and cracks a Bloodstained Mire for a Volcanic, shortcutting to cast the Soul Ring. Although Fernando is quick to fire off a mental misstep, Hidden was honestly surprised he didn't stop Yoshimaru, but he wants his Soul Ring and fires off a Flusterstorm to stop Fernando. Fernando plays a Command Tower and passes. Charles plays a Clifftop Retreat as land, and for 2 casts a Flowering of the White Tree. The enchantment resolves, gaining Yoshimaru a counter and buffing the doggo up to a 4/3 with Ward 1.
Oh my god, you're gonna smack me in the face with that shit.
Yeah, that's gonna do a lot of damage.
I'm not attacking you this turn if that.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to hear.
Charles then heads to combat and smacks Hidden for 4. Colin plays a mountain and casts a Talisman of Conviction. Hidden untaps and casts an Esper Sentinel, following that up with a Wheel of Fortune to refill his now empty hand, ending his turn with a Command Tower. Fernando cracks his own Arid Mesa, fetching out a Tundra, but he also shortcuts as he casts a Talisman of Progress, but has to feed a card to Hidden off the Esper Sentinel. Charles plays a Minas Tirith as land and gains another counter on Yoshimaru, following it up with a Mox Amber. He pays for the Esper and gains another counter, with 2 mana then being used for a Kediss to pump the doggo once again. Charles then turns said doggo sideways and sends 7 damage at Fernando, with the rest of the table also taking 7 in the process. Colin plays and cracks a Flooded Strand to grab an untapped Hallowed Fountain, following that up with an Impact Tremors, not paying for the Esper Sentinel, and following that up with his own Esper Sentinel, triggering the impact triggers for damage to his opponents. Hidden plays a Flooded Strand as land and for 3 casts his commander Malcolm, fetching out a Tundra and using it to cast Path to Exile on Yoshimaru. Hidden pays for the ward but gives a card to Colin off his Esper Sentinel. The dog is exiled and Charles grabs out a Plains. Fernando plays a Snow-Covered Island as land and taps out to cast his commander Brago. Charles heads straight to combat and sends Kediss at Colin, who doesn't block and takes 3, with the rest of the table taking 3 as well. Then Charles on his second main recasts Yoshimaru, and follows that up with a Flagstone of Trokir to put another counter on the pupper. Colin on his turn casts a Kicked Thieving Skydiver. He had originally wanted the Flower of the First Tree, but seeing as the Merfolk only takes artifacts, he ends up taking a Mox Hammer instead. And I know some of you might be asking why when there's a soul ring and a talisman at the table. We find out later, but he had forgotten about the legendary requirement and wanted another colored source of mana instead of a colorless. Charles does have a response though, as he generously gifts Brago with an elephant, giving a card to both Cullen and Hidden in the process. With the table then also remembered to take one off the impact tremors. Hidden has an Ottawaru as land and decides to start the beatdown as he casts his other commander, Bruse, who on ETB gives Malcolm double strike and lifelink, with Hidden turning Malcolm sideways at Charles, who takes the hit, with Hidden getting 2 treasures from Malcolm connecting. Following that up with a Dranith Magistrate. Fernando does not feel in this game at all, as he just plays a tapped Hallowed Fountain and a Strionic Resonator, paying for both Esper Sentinels. Charles has a Hammerheim as land and gains another counter on Yoshimaru, following it up with an Urza's Ruinous Blast, paying for Hidden Sentinel and letting Colin draw. Hidden does have a response as he psych drifts Yoshimaru back to Charles' hand. Hidden can pay for the ward, but not the Esper Sentinel, and Colin draws again, with the blast finally resolving and decimating a lot of the board. With Charles ending his turn with combat, sending Kediss at Fernando for 3, with the whole table taking the hit. Colin plays a tap Portland and for 2 starts rebuilding with an Arcane Signet. And this is when he realizes the legendary clause on the Mox as he attempts to tap it for mana, but instead has to tap out to cast Magda. Hidden starts off with combat, sending both Malcolm and Bruse at Charles, with Bruse giving Malcolm double strike again. Hidden gains 2 treasures off the connect and follows it up with a Shatterskull smacking, where X equals 3, pointing 2 damage at Kediss with the last point heading at Magda. Hidden does have to crack one of his treasures to pay for the ward, but the board is cleared once again. I'm saving you life, Fernando. I'm gonna pass it to that.
Thanks for trying, but I think it doesn't matter, honestly. But thanks for trying, I appreciate it.
Fernando plays another snow-covered island and passes. Charles has a War Room as land and recasts Yoshimaru from his hand. Colin cracks a Prismatic Vista, grabbing out a Mountain to field. 6 mana then gets him a Locust God. Hidden starts off once again with combat, sending Bruse and Malcolm back at Charles, giving Malcolm double strike and netting him 2 more treasures from the mix. Also at this point, remember the lifelink damage, and Hidden fixes his life total. Then on his second main, he casts a Grinding Station. Never late, Fernando in his turn casts a Soul Ring, following it up with his commander Brago, with Charles at his end step flashing in Gandalf the White, which double triggers Yoshimaru to gain him 2 counters. I could have got wrecked there. Charles untaps and casts Mary, Esquire of Rohan, who resolves and gains Yoshi 2 more counters. Charles then heads to combat and sends his team at Fernando. Although to be honest, I was surprised I didn't get smacked, especially with me gaining life. But regardless, this triggers Mary to draw Charles a card, and before blocks, Charles flashes in Kediss thanks to Gandalf, giving Yoshimaru another 2 counters. Fernando then drops to 2, with both Hidden and Colin taking 9 from Kediss. Colin untaps, draws, and gains a 1/1 insect from his Locust God. Then, on his first main, he casts Wrath, Weatherlight Steward. Hidden heads to his turn and for 2 casts a Dockside Extortionist, gaining him 4 treasures and putting 4 Grinding Station untapped triggers on the stack, with Hidden responding by sacrificing a treasure to mill himself 3. The station then untaps and he sacks another treasure to mill. He repeats the process of untapping and milling again, continuing a 3rd time, this time milling a Glinthorn Buccaneer, with the Grinding Station then untapping a final time, with Hidden not milling any more cards after that. He then casts a Savine's Reclamation to bring back the pirate, but in response, Colin casts a Swords to Plowshares on Malcolm. But Hidden has a response, as he deflecting swats the swords to Brago, as he actually wants Fernando to be at a higher life total. Colin then taps Wrath and an insect to draw, and Hidden then heads to attacks, and sends the team minus Dockside at Charles. On attack, he gives Malcolm double strike from Bruse, and then activates the Buccaneer using 2 of his treasures. This lets him discard a card to ping the table and draw, netting him 3 treasures due to Malcolm. He can do this 5 times until it kills Fernando, which will leave him with 8 treasures left. And now the Glinthorn can continue, but it no longer gains Hidden an extra treasure. Hidden keeps it going to take out Colin. And with Hidden's remaining treasures and Malcolm flying in, he can take Charles out as well, winning him the game. And before I get onto the game review, I do want to thank a special Patreon member, Josh Schutt, for his support of the channel, along with all of our other Patreon supporters as well. Game review. Man, does Doggo hit hard. I totally forgot how many legendary cards he had access to. And even having been removed 3 separate times, the popper grew right back. Although I do think his last attack on Fernando was incorrect. With Hidden gaining life, he should have been target number 1, especially when his board wasn't hit nearly as hard from the Ruinous Blast. And speaking of being hit hard, Fernando just couldn't get a foothold in this game. His 4th place start really hurt his game plan when his good hand was wheeled away by Hidden, and then his artifacts were removed, along with his commander being killed a few times, left him pretty out of the game. And for Colin, I think his deck runs a bit slower, but with the Locust God, I think he would have been able to stabilize. And along with the added prowess triggers from Narset, he would have built up quite an army. And as always, I want to thank all the players who joined for the games. And remember, never give up, even if you're dead on board. I'll see you guys later.